A little bit of context, specifically, this is God explaining to Ezekiel specifically, and of course to the Jewish people by extension, that there would be, or there was, a redemption from the exile after the first temple, but that redemption would itself end in exile. In other words, the Jewish people could ostensibly ask, God, what's the purpose of redeeming us from the exile once the first temple was destroyed and giving us another temple, the second temple, only to then destroy that second temple and put us again into exile? That's basically the question, and so here we have the response. Son of man, Ben Adam. So really, Ben Adam just basically means a person. But here, the prophet is called Son of Man, and that is a very particular moniker. The sages tell us that the word Adam, man, or Adam like the first person, is constructed based on the Hebrew word meaning to be similar, Adameh. So really, Adameh le'elyon, I will be similar to the supernal. That phrase is the quality of a person on the level of Adam, on the level of Adam. There are 4 terms for a human being. One of them, the highest of them, is Adam, because of that similarity, Adameh le'elyon. Here, we obviously have a prophet who is channeling the word of God. He is likening himself or being kind of related to the supernal. The house of Israel, as long as they lived on their own land, they defiled it by their way and by their misdeeds. Their way means their mundane behavior. Their things that they used to do when they didn't have specific mitzvahs to fulfill. Their misdeeds are specific actions which they either took in violation of specific prohibitions or a choice to nullify, to not fulfill an obligation. So a misdeed would be eating pork or choosing to not put on tefillin. Their way, is a much more general term, would be just the general things that I could have, for example, spent my afternoon learning Torah, but I chose to, watch the Packers. Generally, you would think that a misdeed would be stronger of an affront to God than an incorrect way. In other words, I have a prohibition that I can point to that someone violated, or I have a specific biblical requirement that I can point to that someone chose to not fulfill. Isn't that worse than generally not, being as good as you could be and maximizing your effectiveness in serving God in general terms? But even though there is what to say about specific commandments being fulfilled and not fulfilled, etc., the main way that we show our devotion to God is not by singular acts of ritual, whether being done according to God's will or not violating a prohibition, but rather to know Him in all your ways, namely to put your regular kind of Tuesday afternoon for God's sake. And in this regard, when they didn't do that, that is the first thing that's listed. Like the uncleanness, really should be impurity, of a woman in the period of her separation, what's called a nida, was their way before me. Throughout this particular translation, whoever the translator is, chose to use unclean or clean as opposed to impure or pure. And we've had all sorts of discussions in all sorts of different other contexts as to why that's very, very not the right choice. So just as a general statement for the rest of the class, unclean should be rendered impure and clean should be rendered pure. But here the main focus is not just impurity of a woman, or impurity even more generally speaking, but impurity of a woman in the period of her separation. Ketumas nida, like the verse says. Now, the nida is, of course, a married woman who hasn't done anything wrong, who hasn't violated any terms of her marriage to her husband, and nevertheless, she and her husband are separated for approximately half of the month, 2 weeks out of the month, while she is a nida, or before she can be purified from being a nida, whatever it is, in the context of her being a nida. The key to the whole purpose of Nida and these 2 weeks of separation is that they are to reunite at the end of that 2-week period, and of course be permitted to each other during the other 2 weeks of the month. So if here God is likening the Jewish people, because of our misdeeds, misbehavior, etc., to the Nida status of a woman, that basically means that even though those misdeeds do cause a level of separation, do cause a level of impurity, that is only temporary by design. And in fact is designed for us to be that much more desirous of a reunification with God.